Hi everyone, I'm Jack, and this is a special report on Shelf 20 of the library tour. Now, I've been investigating Shelf 20 because for 18 years, it's been spreading. It's moved off of our corner of BookTube. I've seen it on other channels. I've seen it on Bookstagram. Shoot, I've even seen it on Goodreads accounts. It keeps spreading. It's originally confined to just a handful of old school metropolitan centers around the United States. It's moved to small towns or whole regions. Cape Cod has been affected. And then it moved offshore. It hit Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and even the Caribbean, hot summers in Havana. This thing has even gotten involved in the numbers racket because some of these have 2 on them. Now, I've got a special informant, rambling raconteur, a denizen of our corner of BookTube, and he's going to take us through the City Noir series from Akashic Books, because this is a series that glorifies decay, glorifies the darkness. It also has some fantastic dynamite entries. So let's take a look at these. Now, originally, this was conceived as a series of anthologies of original short stories commissioned around present writers, most of them crime writers. Some of them might be nonfiction writers or journalists, even poets have gotten involved. And some of these can be quite hit or miss, but the basic premise is that a city, region, or country is selected, and then different neighborhoods within the city usually are identified as sort of the setting for a short crime fiction story. Not all of them are crime fiction. Some of them just deal with isolation. They deal with this tempo of fear, of longing, of something that's not quite, on kilter, if you will. And it originally started in Brooklyn. It spread out to other, boroughs of New York and other regions of the U.S. And then, as I mentioned, it moved international in the best way possible. So I've really enjoyed some of these. I'll start off with Phoenix Noir. This is a great one, if only because I know most of the locations identified in here. And some of the stories were quite good, quite strong. And one of the beauties of it is that each volume has a little map that shows the different locations with the fallen body outline, the chalk outline, of where different stories are going to be located. And so Phoenix Noir, this is one I certainly enjoyed. One that I enjoyed less, one that was definitely on the more hit and miss side, was Los Angeles Noir. And I found this was true as well about Manhattan Noir, Portland Noir, that some of these really were not necessarily going to be crime fiction stories. And that's fine, because as we'll get into some of the classics ones, they don't have to be crime fiction. But there wasn't any sense of unease. There wasn't any sense of tension in them. And that was true about the Los Angeles Noir volume. But the real treat for me, in my reading at least, has been the classics. I mentioned the 2s, the numbers racket, because after the first wave of these across different cities in the US were successful, the Akashic Book publishers went and said, wait a second, we also have, and I think editors kind of pushed on this as well. What if we did the same premise, different neighborhoods around an area, and we instead went and looked at the past 50 to 150 years of crime fiction and poetry and tales from those different cities and combed those together to create a really strong anthology. And that's been true. So Manhattan Noir too, which was edited by Lawrence Block, I believe. Yeah, this is fantastic. It goes all the way back to The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe, which is allegedly set on West 84th Street, all through a whole series of stories that are in the first half of the 20th century or earlier. Edith Wharton, Stephen Crane, O. Henry, Langston Hughes, Damon Runyon, Cornell Woolrich, Horace Gregory, another poet. And so this one is fantastic. This is maybe the single best volume of the series that I've read, and it's the difference between Manhattan Noir 2 and Manhattan Noir was astonishing. San Francisco Noir 2 is another absolutely excellent volume, in part because this is one of the rare volumes that gives the side of pre-earthquake San Francisco, a time when it was known as the Barbarous Coast or the Barbary Coast, and just a very different side that was totally wiped out in the earthquake. So writers like Ambrose Bierce, Jack London, Frank Norris are represented in this volume. But it then moves forward and has all sorts of fantastic crime fiction and just regular fiction. Ernest Gaines, Marcia Muller, Oscar Peñaranda, Janet Dawson, William T. Volman, some greats from the middle of the 20th century like Bill Pronzini and Joe Gores, Don Herron. So this is another very, very strong volume, one that I highly recommend. Brooklyn Noir 2, again, much stronger than Brooklyn. and one that even includes, I believe, at least one horror story, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So there's old school Brooklyn, new school Brooklyn, cops and robbers, and wartime Brooklyn. And this idea that they take the stories and group them into certain sort of rough groupings. So with San Francisco, it's sort of pre-earthquake, and then the through the 1920s, and then more recent stories that might have been published in the 1980s, 1990s. And that's the same with all of these 2 volumes. Another one that was astonishing I read last year was Trinidad Noir, the classics. And this one almost is just some of the best short stories and poetry ever written from Trinidad and Tobago. And so this one has V.S. Naipaul, Harold Sonny Ledoux, Derek Walcott, Earl Lovelace, just a huge number of really, really strong. Barbara Jenkins, Elizabeth Walcott Hackshaw, Sharon Millar. So this one, if you ever see it, I would highly, or it's at your library, I'd highly recommend trying this one out. It might turn you on to a whole group of writers from Trinidad. Boston Noir 2, this was very good. This has an early Spencer story from Robert B. Parker for those fans. And let's see, Joyce Carol Oates, Chuck Hogan, Dennis Lehane, George V. Higgins, which he's one of the great sort of unsung crime writers. And there's numerous others that are fantastic in here. Los Angeles Noir 2, again, very strong volume. This one has Raymond Chandler, of course, James Elroy, James M. Cain, Chester Himes, more usually associated with Harlem, Ross McDonald, Walter Mosley, Margaret Millar. So there are some very, very good writers represented in this volume. Haiti Noir 2, the classics. I'm hoping to get to this one this year. I'm certainly looking forward to it. And then DC Noir 2, this one, of course, is edited by George Pelicanos, but includes Edward P. Jones, Langston Hughes, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Richard Wright, Ward Just. A lot of good writers involved in this one. I had mentioned that it is an international series, and it really is in the best sense of the word. It's not international in that it has some European representation. It really does have global representation at this point. And the publishers have done a nice job of getting editors who understand a city or understand a culture very well to get in and tap into writers who have lived there, who were born there, who have, some association to be able to create some real wonderful works. Havana Noir has been one of the most illuminating, in part, I think, because for so many years, for a couple of generations, there was almost no literature or art or film or anything from Cuba that was being allowed into the U.S. So Havana Noir has been a very illuminating volume to be spending time in. This has been one of my favorites, and this was edited by Achi Obejas. I've really enjoyed this. Accra Noir, which is in Ghana. I mentioned global. It's very rare to see anthology series that are willing to go dig and spend that cultural capital and actual capital to give us a sense of what is happening in Africa. And here, Akashic Noir was willing to do that. So Accra Noir is very good. Lagos Noir is another strong one. Set in Nigeria. In Nigeria, I think there are a huge number of Nigerian writers across the 1950s through 1990s that are sort of very well known, but there have continued to be a lot of great Nigerian writers, and this volume is sort of a way to start accessing who those folks are and to be able to look, what novels have they written? Can I get a hold of those and be able to enjoy those? Marrakech Noir, set in Morocco. And then Dehli. This was one of the earliest volumes I read, and this was, I think, the first one outside of the U.S. that I read, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed getting to understand, a sense of India to a much better degree than I had from almost any other work. And then some European volumes, Copenhagen Noir. This one's fantastic, and I can identify that I've just thankfully been able to read enough Danish writers to know that pretty much all of the very best Danish writers, whether they're crime writers or just essayists or, general short story writers, they're represented in this volume almost to a person. And some of these are fantastic. So Naya Mary Ait, Jonas Bengtsson, let's see, Hell. There was one other one, Christian Lundberg, and Gunnar Staalson. So there's a number that are in here that are just very, very good. And I would recommend this one. Helsinki Noir. This was an odd one because it's edited by James Thompson, who's from the US, but had spent a lot of his life in Helsinki. Helsinki is also very interesting because Finland in some ways is very much part of Scandinavia, but the Finnish language is so different from Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian that all have some interrelations as a language and have at times been able to have, political hegemony over each other across the past centuries. Finland is a little bit separate from that. And so the sides of life that we get in Helsinki are different from what I saw in Copenhagen Noir or what I've read in numerous sort of Scandi Noir books. But this was a good volume. Brussels Noir. Again, this one's been interesting. I wasn't really familiar with any of these writers, but I've enjoyed a number of the stories that I've found in here. The divisions are the razor's edge, surrealism, room to maneuver. The surrealism section is fantastic. Dublin Noir. This was another interesting volume because it's subtitled "The Celtic Tiger versus the Ugly American." They took Irish writers, and then they also took writers from the U.S., the UK, Canada, and had them write stories to kind of flesh out the volume. And it's interesting. I think there are some people who think this is maybe the best volume. I think those are probably the same people who have read Ulysses more than once, but that's just me. Others, I think, find the experiment didn't work quite as well. Prague Noir. This is one of my wife's favorite volumes. I hope to go to Prague one day, maybe soon even. Barcelona Noir. I haven't read all of the stories in this one or in Prague Noir, but I certainly look forward to them. And Belfast Noir. Again, this one's a tougher one because it was really only very recently that the violence moving beyond noir and the personal sort of violence that exists within noir. Even though there can be a social menace, that there's often a very just personal violence to noir, personal dread. It was very public and it was pervasive in Belfast. So this one reads a little bit differently from some of the others. Now, I had mentioned that there were many other U.S. cities and regions. Cape Cod Noir is one of the finer volumes I've found. Cape Cod, of course, is east of Boston, I believe. It's sort of this region that was for a long time sort of a vacation region in Massachusetts, and gradually has become just a more and more expensive region for people to be able to vacation or have a small place, there. And so this is an interesting volume because it captures that change, it captures that tension, and the way that there can be this sense of people who live there and feel that they can be put upon by people who are sort of either tourists or who only come there for vacations and don't really view it as a place to put roots down in. So this volume works to a very large degree. Bronx Noir, old Yankee Stadium there. Providence Noir. This is one I haven't read yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. This one has, I believe, one of the wolves. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought one of the... I think Jeffrey Wolf has a book called Providence. But this is one I am looking forward to getting into as well. And then Richmond Noir. Maybe Very Literary Carrie has read this one. And New Haven Noir. The series really has spread because it gets just, New Haven is not a large metropolitan. Yale University's there. But there were enough good writers there that they could, craft together a volume that works to a large degree. So this is the City Noir series. This is the end of Rambling Raconteur's special report. Let me know if there are any of these that you really enjoy. Let me know if there are others that you've read that you would really recommend. I usually am looking for these in sort of the clearance section of a half-price books or something where I can find them for $1 or $2. Because I generally don't just read them straight through. Most volumes I'll just kind of pick and choose, and I've really enjoyed doing that. So let me know if there are any of these that you really enjoy. And again, I hope everybody's doing well. Happy March Mystery Madness. See you later.